like to welcome everybody to panel session A3, Internationalization Assessments. And I would like to introduce you to Paul-Henri Arnaud, Leandro Rees, and Mike McKenna. And they're going to be talking about their collaborative efforts towards bringing together their different ways of assessing internationalization and reporting and various other techniques. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Leandro, who's going to start off.
Thank you, Gary. So this is really the story of one idea that three guys had at different times in different companies. It all started with Mike from Yahoo. He developed his own globalization assessment tool. Around the same time, Paul and he had the same idea at Autodesk, and we created something called the globalization dashboard. And myself, with the help of some folks, we created a globalization report card at Adobe. So we first learned of each other about late 2009. That's when I first was contacted by Paul and me. We had a meeting in San Jose, and we learned of each other's efforts and goals. And about a year later, while attending the Unicode conference, we learned of Mike's tool at the Unicode conference. So after that, we sort of got together and realized that we had been duplicating efforts a little bit, but our intentions were noble, and we had a lot of things that we could collaborate on. So we decided to work together and see what we could come up with, something that perhaps we could share with the industry. And Mike came up with this idea of, why don't we just present this at the Worldware conference that's coming up. So here we are. We really identified early on that we had the same objectives. It's all about measuring the state of internationalization of our products. That was the foundation, the common link between us. We all wanted to be able to report those results, those findings, to management and the other stakeholders in our companies. And more importantly, we wanted to be able to track any progress that we might have made as a result of those findings in the bettering of the products that we were assessing. Our first step was really to sit down and look at our different tools and our basic requirements and categories, look at the differences, similarities, and see if we could come up with something that would make sense, that would be worthy of sharing. So here we are. We are going to be showing you what those findings are, what those similarities and differences are, and also we will be telling you a little bit about our plans for the future. We hope to go from here. So Mike will be the first one to tell us how he implemented this at Yahoo.
Well, thank you. So before I start, how many of you are involved in or responsible to see that software gets globalized properly? Would expect such a turnout because of the nature of the conference. How many of you have had difficulty trying to figure out how to do it in a way that others understand? Okay, yeah, be honest. So
Same people.
we had that issue at Yahoo as well. We created a tool, I would say, thank you for calling it my tool, but it's our team's tool that we built. And we had to look at things, for us, that we have, there's probably about 500 different products or so that we manage at Yahoo. And when we tell the company that you need to be global, they say, yeah, we're global, but we need to be able to point back at some metrics that they can use to identify that with. Let's see, okay. I have a laser here, so I can point at the various boxes. So one thing that we did that's a little bit different than what we've seen with others is I like process. So we highlighted things according to where they are on the product life cycle in terms of are you doing your product plans? Are you doing the design, because the UI is very important for us? Are you working then from there into the technical parts on locale sensitive behavior, content management, etc. And then we've broken down from capabilities. Within each capability, sets of requirements, which would have a series of questions tucked in for each requirement, and then we would assign a score based on answers to those questions. Yes, no, or not applicable. So the back-end only product, the UI is not applicable. And then we provided different views with that. So this one that's presented here is a summary view just for a data representation page, which is only showing the areas that are deficient for a particular product. And you can look at the whole detailed view, you can look at all the various pieces, or go into the assessment view, which asks the questions and you provide the answers. And then it's tied back into the bugs database. So once you've entered the various issues, you can put those into the bugs database, so then they can be tracked in the tool that all the engineers already use, because they prefer to use only one tool and not our tool. So as long as we have a method to allow them to ask the correct questions, then get it back into the bugs database, then it can be tracked in a way that everybody else understands. And finally, we provided a mechanism to be able to track how the product is doing over time and in conjunction with various dependent components or dependent products and so on. And we've had mixed results in how it's been regarded by people using the survey. If you are a product manager and you don't do something, you say, well, of course we don't do it because I don't have it in the requirements, so it's not applicable. If you're an engineer and someone does the same survey for the same product and you do not do something, they go, well, I should be doing this, so therefore it's something we should be doing in the future, and it comes up. So we find that it requires a bit of babysitting to see that it gets done correctly. So with that, we'll go on to the next one with Adobe.
So the globalization report card is basically a tool. It's a self-assessment tool we provided to the product teams. Usually the QE teams are the ones who use it to make that assessment. We came up with 20 categories divided into enablement and localizability. The tool is supported by some pretty heavy documentation. We wanted to make sure that everyone using the tool had access to additional information should they not understand what the grading criteria was or what the categories were. We also created a dashboard that consolidated all the product grades into this very easy to understand UI. And our audience there was really management. We wanted management to be able to very quickly tell which products were doing well or not so well. And we use this data entry tool, this grade entry tool, and the dashboard in conjunction as the basis for our discussions with the product teams. So we would get them into a room, sit down, and show them the grades and explain to them where the problems were, what the gaps were. And overall it worked quite well. They liked the visuals, they liked the fact that we took the trouble to develop this and give them a grade. I guess that's something that's more tangible than just saying, this or that is wrong with your product. No, here's a grade. Here's how you compare to this other product. So that helped in the communication with the product teams. Let me show you what the tool looks like. So where is the laser thing? So, okay, so this is the data entry tool, or the GRC tool. It's very, very popular at Adobe. Everyone knows about this tool now. So the way it works is you have two panels, or two panes. You make the product selection up here. You can't see the one of the selections, but here's where this for the business unit. Here's a drop-down menu. You would select a product here. Then this would pop up, and what you see here is, in this column, is a list of the categories. Things such as language support, or local awareness, or cultural awareness, things such as number formats, date formats, UI externalization. So everything that is really related to the internationalization of a product was condensed into 20 categories. So this is the first pane. It just shows what the top categories are and what the grades are for each. On the right-hand side panel, this is really where the grading takes place. So here you see what we call Adobe requirements. So each category here on the left-hand side has a subset or a smaller set of requirements that provide a finer grading for that category. So, for example, for this top category called Western Language Support, European Language Support, I think that says typing characters. The screenshot shows that we have about 5 or 6 grading options here, ranging from no support to full support. So the evaluator would just select the appropriate grade depending on the behavior or state of the product. That would then be going to this grade database, and the grade would be automatically calculated as you go. We have the ability to enter comments. You can enter additional information here. And the grades are shown over here. Okay? You have the ability to generate reports as well. This is what the dashboard looks like. The products are listed here. These are just placeholders. I don't have real grades or products here. The columns include the 20 categories that I was talking about. Total grade in the rightmost column. And the colors here, you can't quite tell the yellow from the green, but we have red, yellow, green. That just represents the range for the grade for that specific product and category. So red is a low grade, anywhere between 0 and 50%. Green is a perfect grade. The product is perfect in that particular requirement. Yellow is anything in between.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Those assessment, is that tied to a QA process, or is that an assessment by an analyst, I'll say?
The assessment is conducted by QE people, by testers, and although we don't have this implemented yet, we ask them to, like, when you go over here and you're entering a grade, in this comment here, this comment button, we ask them to enter a plug number. Should they find an issue, they should document this.
I was more thinking of a test plan for each one of those categories. The test plan would be linked to the particular dot that says it passes the test.
Oh, we did not create that test plan ourselves. Each product team is responsible for creating their test plans, and we encourage them to try and mirror this as much as possible, or integrate the categories that we find here as much as possible. But we don't have much control over what they do. Each product team has their own personality. Does that answer? Any other questions about GRC? Okay, so I think here is next.
Thank you. So just to confirm, this will be a panel discussion format, but we're going to start off with a presentation just to give you solid foundation for more precise questions, give you other ideas. So just to let you know, we do plan to have lots of time for discussion. We want to get through a few pieces here of background. So just to describe the Autodesk Globalisation dashboard, we have two main components to this. One we see is a data entry piece that has very basic viewing as part of it. And then also all the data goes into databases. We have a general kind of data mart where we have lots of other information than just this globalization dashboard, and we can do some data analysis on that. We've split out at a very high level into 4 major areas. So these areas count software and documentation, and then also within each of those there's a localization ready or localizability part, and also a world ready part. So this maps to what Leander was speaking about enablement. For the purposes of our collaboration, we're on the Autodesk side, we really focus on the software part, since this maps a little closer to what Adobe and Yahoo also have inside these assessment tools. So here's a screenshot of our product, and we also have on the left side a list of 20, well, if you count all the documentation pieces, maybe up to 30 different categories there. For each category, we have kind of an icon score that ranges from a perfect score to acceptable to needs improvement. There's also kind of an average number for that entire area, but we feel like the icon is, in the icon we actually put the worst score is visible there. We feel like the average score is sometimes, well, it's not misleading, but it's kind of useful to have 2 pieces of information. This is what the average score is, and this is what the most limiting factor is. Afterwards, on the right-hand side, once you click on an individual category, then you have a list of all the specific, the very individual questions. So this is what we call criteria. It's also called requirement in the Adobe and Yahoo systems. So an individual criteria requirement has a specific answer for it, and it also has, on this area here, details, so a much more detailed description of that criteria. Also a link into other systems we have in terms of globalization guidelines or test cases. Another piece we have here is something we call a rating guide. So in terms of the different options, 0 through 10, we would like to give an idea of how to grade that in a more consistent way. In addition to just picking a particular score, whether it's fully supporting or needs a lot of work, there's also room just to put some comments that would be specific guidelines of what needs to be addressed to improve the score. And really the most important part is the actual defect numbers, because the information we have here in the communication with teams can't be really vague. It has to be, when you have specific part numbers, this is what speaks to people, what can be addressed. And one final part here is we have a workflow in this process where a particular score is not published until there's been a time for the development team to address the issue. So in a sense, with this kind of partnership, we have a set of people who kind of analyze the product and maybe give an initial score, and then we'd like to have a chance for the development team to say, okay, we accept that, or is this true, or so on. So we have this kind of 2-step process, a kind of an approval process. On the data analysis component, this would be for more in-depth kind of data mining of the data, is that first the person here can select kind of filter off different criteria. For example, you can choose you'd like to compare maybe one product with different release years, or is it going to be different products that are somehow related, maybe they ship as part of a suite or so on. So once you've picked what your filter is, then in this part here, you see these kind of radar charts where each set of circles in a different color represents one particular product. So you can kind of easily compare, you can see kind of the evolution of a product from one release to the next release or to another product. In terms of the overall comparison score, this is one that's, that here we're trying to encourage people to look at a ratio of high to low scores. Just one score for a product, I think it can hide some information unless you really start getting more information like standard deviation. Is it all, if the score has, say, a rating of 80%, is it because everything's 80%, or is it because you have a lot of 100% ratio of high scores to low scores for a particular project. So I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for the initial discussion.
One question I have at the moment is how, within your common framework, are you able to predict localization, localization costs?
Okay, so just to repeat the question for everyone, is how, with this framework, can we predict localization cost? So I would say, in our case, it's not something that we can predict yet. We need to have more data in place. But it fits into this project in the sense that once we have the data into the system on a consistent basis across products, we will have different localizability criteria, ranging from very basic criteria, are strings externalized, to more complex criteria. Is the layout working quite well without much resizing effort, or are string arguments properly substituted, and so on. So with this data, or with this system, we can gather data on different products. Now we have, in this kind of overall data mark, we also have actual cost data for past projects. And once we have it all into the same system, we can start to do some analysis there. So for us, it's kind of step 2, is once we have data in there, then we can do this type of analysis.
Yes, this does not provide a direct correlation with cost savings, but I believe it does give you a good idea of which areas could provide cost savings. For example, if your localizability grade is low, that means that you're likely experiencing a lot of issues with string truncation, text corruption, which would generate a lot of bugs. QEs spending a lot of time opening bugs, and engineers are spending a lot of time fixing those bugs. So when I talk to a product team, I usually say, your grade is really low here. If you were to improve that grade, that will likely save you some testing time and bug fixing time. So that is sort of an indirect correlation, but I was never able to tell them, here's how much in dollars you would be saving. I try to avoid going there, but just giving them a good sense of where the areas of improvement could be.
And for us, we're not quite as concerned about the cost of localization because as a web-oriented applications, there's very few words in each application, maybe 500 or so. But we make it a requirement that there's a certain number of the requirements that have to be completed before they're allowed to enter into the localization process. Otherwise, we consider it broken. And so what we judge on more is KPIs, key performance indicators of number of viewers in particular markets, number of clicks, how long people stay on a website. And we encourage them that as they get more of the not mandatory requirements, the things that make the user interface more enjoyable and relevant to the users, to get more of those in place, then their KPIs will be going up in various markets. So I've got one thing I'd like to share with you. Do you want to go to the next slide? Okay, let's do that.
Oh, actually, at this point, we have a few more slides where we'll discuss kind of more overview of the common results. But if there's any questions right now, maybe we can take a few questions if someone already has.
So each one of you built basically your own tool to track or assess your world readiness in a certain way. When you get together, or when you go together, how did you find that what you were tracking was pretty much 90%, 100% overlap, or you were looking at different things?
What a perfect segue.
Yeah, that's a perfect question for the next slide. So
I'll buy you a beer after.
Common results.
So there's another question.
Yeah, did you have trouble finding people who knew exactly how to answer your questions? That is, first of all, had the technical background, both in internetization and development, and because I worked with a similar tool when I worked at IBM, and that was a common issue we had, that people were scratching their heads and either not understanding the internationalization, terminology, Unicode specifics, etc.
No, that's an absolutely perfect question, because at Yahoo that is the case. That if we're working with a whole business unit, we were first assigned to a program manager. The program manager doesn't know the product and doesn't know the market, but knows who to talk to here, get these questions answered. And an engineer would come along and doesn't really understand it and say, writing systems? Sure, we do writing. I can write right now. So what we're doing is we're staffing up, because we found such a mix of results, we're staffing up similar to what you have at IBM with the globalization champions that have to be assigned down to no more than like 6 products or so they can sit down with the architect and drill down on the specific details and so on. And then I will feel more comfortable with the consistency of the results that we get out.
Sorry, and this person would sit in the globalization part, the globalization champion, or what's the development side?
We are globalization and internationalization, and we work side by side, different functions, but when one talks, the other one is alongside, and the other one talks, the first one's alongside. So they would be embedded in the teams, similar to the localization manager would be.
At Adobe, we have very few people that have both those skills, that knew the product very well and globalization very well. But there were some folks like that. Did you have another question?
Yeah. So you guys share the result with business intelligence. How do you influence their side for marketing? Coming back to you and say, okay, I want to go out with this product and do it. Go both ways, I guess. I was wondering if you have some kind of engagement.
We should, but it's something that we are actually tackling this year. And we have a group that works with business that it's more at a much higher level than what we deal with, I think all of us on the surveys. So someone in BI doesn't really care if they have mirroring on the UI. They just want to know if they can support the Middle Eastern markets. So it's kind of at a different level, but it's still information.
Yep. I mean, our system is really integrated into a business intelligence system that we have within the localization team. At a higher level, I mean, our goal is to use the system with product managers as well to give them a kind of snapshot of areas of improvement if you want to go into certain markets.
Trying to kind of control people making a false promises, going out to the market first and coming back to us to take care of the problems on myself.
But are you, for example, able to say, unless you score at least, 90% or 90 points or whatever, don't even ask me to localize your product?
Today, yes.
Yeah, we do give them that message, perhaps not as like you framed it, but we say, you're scoring low, and if you improve your score, that could open the door to some new markets. That's how we deliver it.
Maybe I just wanted to just follow up on one question from the back beforehand, just in terms of our, finding people who can answer the questions and so on. So I think we saw that as a potential issue going into the project, that it's kind of it can be a difficult task, but we went ahead anyways because we wanted to. I mean, we thought it was still an important system. And just for a little bit of history, our system has kind of been derived more on the localization team side. So in terms of our current process, it's kind of a localization engineer familiar with the product who has the first pass for answering the different questions. And then afterwards, we see that as the development team kind of confirming that's the current state. But we don't see that as the final state of this. We see this, it can also be reversed. There's no particular need that localization needs to fill in first. It could just as well be in the second stage, next release, development teams fill it in first, and maybe the localization team kind of confirms the answers on that. And I guess the other part of that is we do try to make the system as Leander and Mike described as self-documenting as possible, to really have links into more information and so on.
Yeah, I had a question. So I developed, with my team, I developed a system at Zynga where we actually have, pretty elaborate checklists for internationalization, localization, global, and overall cross-functional global readiness. But it's milestones. So we go from the projected launch date, whether it's a new game launching in multiple languages or it's an old game that we're localizing at the time, and then we work backwards. And through our little project management tool, you get pinged on the day when you need to start a certain task, milestone, whatever, and then when you're supposed to finish it. And so it actually contains a lot of these bits and pieces, but I found that as we too work with producers in game teams, much like Mike is saying, working with program managers who will go and chase that widget for you, even if they don't know what it is. So I'm finding it more responsive if there's this timeline that and clock is ticking, and producers, program managers do operate on that on those parameters. Do you do that as well? So in addition to your checklist, you have a certain timelines that you assign them to, or it's more just self-evaluation overall?
On our side, we have a timeline of when we produce this. I mean, for us right now, it's a bit of a kind of a post-project review phase. So, for example, we don't see really filling this in during the project time. That's not to say that there's no steps related to globalization that happen during the project. For example, in our list we have milestones, and for example there's testing milestones and software development milestones. Those are the kind of things that will reflect in the final score that those milestones were met and so on.
Okay, well, so that does kind of work into your development system, process already.
Yeah, so there's definitely milestones that are inside the development system. The actual act of filling this our kind of sheet out is a different, it's kind of another process.
Different exercise altogether.
So, other comments?
Yeah, so we, like Autodesk, we also have certain things happening, certain milestones. For the globalization report card specifically, what we recommend the teams do is right after a product ships or is released, they complete the GRC. Okay. And then we have a conversation with them, tell them about the gaps and what they could do to fix or close those gaps. And then we recommend that at the end of that, the next release, they do another, or they update the GRC. So you see the progress. And so that's really the only recommendation we have as far as feeding this solution to the milestone. Yeah, so that's how we handle it.
We're basically the same as Adobe in that we use the Global Ready tool to take a checkpoint of where the product is today and then use the results out from that to help negotiate what their engineering goals need to be for the next release. We have a certain minimum set of requirements that we've established, and we say these are not negotiable.
Must-haves.
Things such as Unicode, things such as externalizing your messages, things like that. These are not negotiable, they must be done, and we want to know when they will be done. And then once they're on the bandwagon going forwards, then it's the same as Adobe. You release a particular major or a next minor rev, and then go through the checkpoint process again, see where you are, progress, and then let's negotiate for the next step forward so we can increase the usability of the product in the marketplaces. Next.
So, what kind of accountability is there? Product gets released and needs to be recalled, or it fails in some market for some reason. Who in your organizations is held accountable when something like that happens? Or is there accountability?
Japanese users can't use it. But what happens in the market, I guess they just accept it or deal with it.
Well, isn't it odd that, you know, your sales organization or people who are projecting revenue or somebody isn't saying, I want the head of whoever
Release this stuff.
whoever was responsible for this.
I think also well, in our case, even though I say we do have issues we need to resolve, I don't think we've had anything that severe that happened so far. I mean, the different grades is not only terrible; it's also average to better. So, for example, we're oftentimes looking at what can we do to move from average to better on the scale. I think sometimes some issues that are really, when you say terrible scores, maybe already known inside. Right now is not the right time to go for that market.
Well, but in terms of process, right, so at the point the product is released and you're reviewing it and saying we should be doing more stuff, if the product folks, if your sales folks aren't demanding a change, if it were me, I would say, I've got other things to do. Wait, why are you bothering me? Nobody's complaining, right? And I think that there is a point here about, for all of us, that we put all these systems in place, but it should boil back to dollars somewhere. Otherwise, there's a legitimate argument for why are we doing this? And as I recall, at one point when I was at Yahoo, there was accountability because we had a series of release processes, which we said the engineering manager and the project manager were accountable. And you could forego a review and you could ignore some steps. But at some point, if there was a problem with the product, was your job or you were going to be held accountable. And that was a driver for people, not only for the I18n standards, but for the other standards to make intelligent decisions and take risks. Like, I know enough about this, I don't have to consult. There are some things I don't need to risk my job. Let's go through the process as it's defined and let's manage the project the way it should be. But without accountability, then I don't know. I sometimes question that. First of all, that tells me why it's hard, and not just for your companies, for companies I work with, but also it's too easy to have requirements that don't make sense for some applications, and for people to push back because they see other opportunities that may be legitimately more important.
For us, we have changed a bit since you were at Yahoo last, in that, not a lot, but ultimately the product manager is the one whose head will, I don't know about rolling, but will certainly be disfigured. But the product manager now is no longer in the engineering organization, but reports up through a product group which is tied into product marketing as well, so that there's a connection back to the markets. And we put an effort in the globalization team, an extra effort in to make ourselves visible and over to the product marketing people to say, to encourage them, you are not in these markets, and we are making sure your product is available to be able to work in those markets. It's your guys' job now to set up your go-to-market team to be sure you actually sell in those markets, have the right data feeds, news feeds, etc. And we are offering ourselves as a center of excellence to help you move forwards in terms of your design, the product behavior, if you need usability, we can know where to point you at, etc. And if they don't want to take our services other than the absolute minimum requirements, then it's up, they will be the ones to suffer the consequences. But, so it ties back into the PMM roles, and then engineering has to tie in with the product managers to be sure they create what is being done.
Who are the actual consumer of your charts reports? Who, on a day-to-day basis, will go and check for the green lights or the 50% assessment?
Product managers, engineering managers, security managers.
So it's through the organization today that you'll be able to promote that.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
so one thing that is common to our three tools is that they are accessible to the entire organization, internal organization. They're web-based tools, they're hosted in the intranet, it's there for everyone to see. We want them to see the differences.
Including the results.
Yes, including the
But I'm
results.
saying they're available to everyone, but who actually uses that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah,
Who
the
makes
folks-
use of that data? Of that
The folks I just listed, they, those are the ones we talk to when trying to convince them to do something about the problem.
For us, it's the product managers who, working with the engineering architects for what the efficiencies are, and then director level and above for visualization of progress.
Well, at this point, if I should suggest we try to get through the remaining 3 or 4 slides, and then we have time for the other discussion unless there's burning questions. So in terms of some of the common results, this is the questions we decided at the beginning that we said we would postpone a little bit. So really one of the foundations for our system are the list of individual questions. It's a detailed question or requirement that has an answer for it and a score. And this gives you an idea of what's in our system right now. So for example, we have between 60 and 150 individual questions in our different systems. And when we looked at what was common, and when I say common, I mean at least common between 2 of the 3 systems, we had around 100 or so, 110 that were common between at least 2 of the 3 companies. Of course, these comparisons are a little bit hand-on at times because you have some that's maybe a 1-to-n link or an n-to-1 link, but it's on that order of common criteria. After we have this list of individual questions, the next step was to group them together into related categories. So it was kind of interesting. We had a kind of similar 20 to 25 number of categories between the 3 systems. And this is where we had one part of divergence afterwards, was what do we do with these categories afterwards. So in the case of Yahoo, these categories were grouped into what's called capabilities, and in the case of Adobe and Autodesk, these were grouped into the enablement and localization ready areas. So here's a little more of a proposal that kind of merges, I'd say, key points of our different categories. So here we have, I think, under 30 categories still, 25 to 30 categories. And this is a recommendation. It's really taken actually from our different lists of what's interesting to see at a high level for different both contributors to the globalization of a product and also the consumers of globalized product. So in terms of contributors to a globalized product, you really want to put emphasis that it's not just the software team who is responsible for a globalized product, but it starts at least at the product management level. So there's really a number of tasks that have to happen at the product planning, product management level to have a well-globalized product. We also thought it was important to emphasize the role that the user experience or product design teams have in making a globalized product. And of course, the general kind of software development teams, they have quite a bit of responsibility as well, in terms of maybe some teams have an architecture team specifically, or even without an architecture team, there's key concepts that are good for teams. Maybe experienced teams will know about these, but for kind of brand new teams, it's good to reinforce these different kind of key concepts in globalization. Another component that's useful is that this kind of top-level view or top-level scores is have an idea of the readiness of this product for different regions. There's kind of a proposal for kind of different common areas of different types of globalization support. And then in terms of consumers of a globalized product, I mean the ability to localize a product efficiently and cheaply is important. So there's a number of key indicators here about really from base localization concept of having UI extracted to getting more advanced layout, how the build and deliverables are, and so on. So this is good. This is well done. You really have a merger of all different categories. It shows top level view. It's not to say that maybe some companies in some instances will need to modify this, maybe there's particular projects also very important that you want to have a score that's very visible for that. But as a starting point for a group of categories, this is something that we'd recommend. Leandro, is this
Real quick, because I noticed we are running out of time, and I would like to get some more questions from the audience, but we do plan on continuing our collaboration here. There are a few areas that we would like to invest more time in. For example, defining what would be a sensible common type of grading criteria. Do we go with just yes or no, or do we offer something like a 5-level type of rating, such as the one I use at Adobe? Also, grading. How do we communicate the meaning of an 85% grade? The question that you had earlier. How do you convert a number to, yes, I can go into this market, that market. We need to do a little bit more work on that. And then lastly, we're looking into ways of filtering the data so that we can present it in a way that makes sense to the audience. For example, if somebody's interested in desktop application or mobile application or web-based application, we are looking into ways of providing that view. Also, by roles, if a product manager just wants to know what markets I can get into, we would be providing that. An engineer might want to know something else. So we would do some filtering by role in that way. Do you want to do the demo on that, or should we just
I could show that
utilize the rest of this?
as kind of a catalyst for additional questions. So when we were looking at the different aspects of the globalization criteria, let's see if I get this right. Okay. This is just basically the same format of we put everything to collaborate amongst us. Adobe has their collaboration tool, Yahoo has their groups, and Autodesk, I guess we could share the drawing files, but we ended up using Google Docs to collaborate and put everything into sets of spreadsheets, and then manually went through to compare between the different categories and so on. And another view that we came up with of the different criteria was world ready, which is most of the engineering bits, formats and things, localization ready, that you've externalized all the content, and then product planning was similar, but then an area that was a little bit different between our different views is if you were dealing with the web, web content management, that didn't quite fit into a common area where you're dealing with things such as content sharing and promoting the content, etc. Another area that was a little bit different is if you had packaged software. It's actually, you put it in a box, you open the box, you install it on your machine, and that's a little bit different, so you actually have to ship the product as opposed to just releasing it online. What I'd like to do is take this opportunity to, I guess, open up for general questions from all of you, and then we have, I think, one more slide with contact information where you can get the slides that we have, and then email so that you can ask us if you want to follow it along as we start exploring the next steps. So I'm going to leave it to our illustrious MC at this point.
I have another question, sorry. So I'm just curious about your next steps. I mean, this sounds like a really exciting collaboration. Are you thinking of doing something further, and maybe, I don't know, what is the reason for you to bring it to this forum, but I'm just curious if you are seeing this as larger and more industry collaborative than just on the level of your 3 companies?
Well,
and can we join?
That's my question. Can we join?
That sort of, I guess, helped push me forward is we had one fellow at the Unicode conference who was saying, you know, I do everything with open source software. And I want to be able to build global software, and there's all kinds of things that have been contributed that are out there. I don't know how global they are. It would be great for me, as a developer of open source applications, to be able to pick and choose from whatever's on SourceForge and be able to see a rating. I know this has got a B, or I know this has got an A for these markets. I want to be able to take it, plug it in, and be able to allow communities to be able to rate and grade things that are contributed. And in the same way, we could be able to say I'm building an application that I need to bring Adobe Flash in. How does that rate across my different markets or something, et cetera. So that's the first part of the question. And the next part was, can we play too?
I would say yes. I mean, that's why we're here. We're here to share with you what we thought would be a valuable contribution to our industry, to our community. We are obviously only three guys. We have our worlds, our domains. We do not cover everything that everybody is doing out there. Yes, we would love to hear from you. We would love to get your feedback. If you want to contribute, participate, get in touch with us. It would make this effort much richer, much more comprehensive. I would say that it's critical, actually. In order for this to be useful to you guys out there, you have to contribute to it, so it's relevant.
We are not a consortium. We don't have an open source license of any sort, but all three of us, I can safely say, we've checked with our own individual legal departments to be sure what we're doing is legit, that we're only sharing non-proprietary information that we've already, for the most part, gathered from other public sources and so on. But it's how can we put it together in a way that's digestible in a organized way for everyone else.
So, are you taking an organic growth approach, or are you just rolling out at a certain point, like you started with a few items to check it out?
Yes and no. Why are we presenting it here? Two things. One is because there's a deadline. So we have to aim towards having something that we can present publicly. And I think the second one is kind of a reality check. You know, before you guys, if you say you're all wet, what, you know, this is useless, whatever. Might be a good question for you guys. Does this seem useful to you as the developers, implementers, etc.?
Man, I'm all over this. I mean, I literally just came out of a meeting yesterday with Olivier over at Cisco, and they were like, we need a globalization scorecard. You know, so it's very apropos, and this includes a lot more broader view of the application, which I think is really good, because it kind of includes what's not in the code that needs to be in the code, and that's really hard for people to figure out. The more difficult part is taking the data and turning it into the information of how much, how many people, how long is it going to take, and that's always specific, but this is really a great data gathering bit of information.
So, of course it's great, and it's needed in the industry, and those of us that have been consulting, we all have our own private list, which are good in some areas, and we find they're lacking in others as we work with different kinds of scenarios that clients have. So, of course it's great, and the more public and sharing and feedback we can get into it, the better. I think what I would like to see as next steps, and not necessarily for you, but generally, I think the idea of asking questions, I think that's good for education and planning purposes. I think a key driver for organizations is to have a test and know whether they pass or fail. And I think a good next step would be to map each of the questions into either here are some values that should be exercised, or here's the scenario of a test, because you have to genericize it somewhat. But at the end, if I could turn around and look at my QA team, or any QA team, and say, there's 150 questions, tell me how many tests you have and how many are passing. And for a group that's starting out for planning purposes, perfectly fine to say, here's 150, they're all failing because we haven't done anything, but you track progress. And the fact that people answered yes or no, they never really know where the failures are. They always say, yes, we're UTF-8, and then down under the covers you find 50 places where they're not, right? So all that kind of stuff. So I think getting an and that's where you could start to have some meaningful progress tracking within an organization. The other thing that would be great is if we could somehow establish some costing and sizing around, because now that we know what the issues are, you might also be able to say, well, if I have a product and it's this many lines of code, and we're doing this for a number of organizations to actually achieve this level of globalization, it took this long, or each release takes this much time to localize. Am I efficient compared to the next guy? What should it cost me? And to be able to move it in that direction. So that it's a great start. And my 2 cents, I think that's among the next steps, not the only next steps, but that's where I would go. And I'd be happy to help with that. Some of it anyway.
Right, we have 2 minutes left. I have to make the most of this time. I just wanted to ask a very quick question, and if you could give me a very brief answer. What have been the challenges you have faced implementing this common framework within your own organisations?
Convincing folks that it's worthwhile doing this, explaining to them why this is very good, and then finding the right people to buy into it and do it, and do the assessment. And same for us, finding in teams to allocate time to do it, and then expert people who know the product to go through the assessment of this.
And I think on our side as well, it's really finding the time to do this in a fair fashion. And I think we have ideas for kind of next versions of this to find out if for different criteria we can have ways to do some automatic data collection. So this is our goal from the beginning. In this first version, we don't have this automatic data collection, but we may have to change other systems. For example, our defect tracking system, so we can provide more fine-tuned data that we can more easily mine use in this analysis as well.
Thank you very much.
On the slide here at the bottom, the slides for the presentation today, they'll be, I guess, posted with the Worldware, but this is a Google Sites account, which right now just has our presentation. And we are going through the final edits of our combined spreadsheet that has the categories, requirements, and each one of them is already annotated with our own sets of notes and so on, and that will be published probably in a month or so. One of the other issues is finding the time for ourselves to build these sets of requirements.